I think the one thing that's exciting a lot of people in terms of cannabis is that the market itself is going at such a phenomenal rate. From a development point of view, a lot of the times when you look at it, it's talking about having a look at the pharmaceutical standard that you want, pharmaceutical quality, but you want an FMCG turnaround time, and where some people are asking for it is an FMCG costing, which is not always related. I think when you look at the development in terms of also legislation in South Africa, as well as the rest of the world, the development is happening quite quickly, and people are also asking multiple different types of questions. I think the importance from my point of view is going to be that to focus on the development process, and that's and how that potentially mirrors the pharma and the complementary medicines market, and again, where the opportunities potentially lie, not only locally, but internationally as well. Our focus ultimately is from source to shelf, and that looking at where the products themselves are grown, the processing, and that because that has a direct impact on the quality and again, what products can actually be done. So when we look at a traditional cannabis new product development process, we'll look at things like idea generation, idea screening, concept development and testing, market strategy, business analysis, product development, testing, and again, commercialization. I think the importance, and looking around the room, a lot of people, it's been able to also take those ideas and commercialize it. If you're not commercializing products, you actually have a great idea that you only share with your friends. Sometimes those are the best, but generally when we're talking about taking a good concept that will benefit the end user, that commercialization is very important. It's being able to take that idea, define it, test it. Looking around the room, there's a lot of people that have been testing cannabis, and that's and enjoying the testing of the cannabis. But when we're talking about different types of pharmaceutical dosage forms, it's being able to also make sure that we're designing those, we're branding it, again, also funding it. The funding from your growing all the way through to the final product is also very important. Where you manufacture it, your launch, and how you sell the product as well. A lot of people also look at the 4 Ps of product marketing mix, and that's your product, pricing, place, and promotion. A product that does well overseas doesn't necessarily do well in South Africa or, for example, in America. And it's important to make sure that to take into account that legislative process and making sure that that also is where you're looking at your final product itself. Your traditional pharma approach to product development is looking at discovering your active pharmaceutical ingredient, knowing exactly what that is in terms of the molecule itself, being able to define it as a medicine, being able to formulate it into a final product, mass production, and commercialization. This is, however, not the traditional route when we're looking at our cannabis products. I'll get to how that will change going forward. Just origins in South Africa, dagga, as is commonly known, or giggle twig, and your different other variants, and that was commonly used by the Khoisan all the way back in the 1700s. So I think that there's a huge traditional link, not only in South Africa, but internationally, where we can actually see where the products were originally formulated and how they were formulated back then. Legislation, we'll see that this type of map on a monthly basis changes from our reds to our green gold, and that is also very important. In South Africa, where again a lot of our focus is to be able to say, well, what's happened and how quickly has this actually happened? Where we look at, yes, South Africa is signed up to the INCB, and with regards to looking at the product itself, changing from the Medicine Control Council to SAHPRA now, we're looking at cannabis still is defined as Schedule 7. So it's still defined as an illegal product in a cannabis format. It does, however, look at where SAPs are looking at it in terms of that, yes, it's illegal, but how are they actually prosecuting currently? One nice thing is we've had a lot of legislation changes. So, for example, in 2017, there was changes where cannabinoid was down-scheduled from Schedule 7 to a Schedule 4. At that point, many products were starting to come onto the market, a lot of them with very little or no claims being made, purely on the basis to try and take account of that one line that said that it's used for industrial use, you were allowed to put it onto the market. Where we're looking, however, that the changes concurrently also happened in terms of the growing, The growing, again, also from Feb 2017, where a lot of people put in the application, not only for the research, but also the commercialization of that, not only for cultivation, but also extraction, manufacturing, and also final sale of products. The products themselves, however, changed drastically earlier this year in May, when the exemption notice came out from the Minister of Health. This allowed products that had CBD in the final product, 20 milligrams or less, with a number of other restrictions to that, were being sold. As a result, the market itself exploded in terms of what the requirements were and also what the end users wanted to have as a result. But it's important to look at holistically the whole thing and the chain of, or the supply chain in terms of cannabis. So starting to look at the cultivation, we'd need to know where the products are actually being grown. How are they being grown, whether it's in plain dirt, cocoa, hydro, aero, and again, making sure that we're taking it from seed all the way to the harvest. The life cycle of it also plays a valuable role. We've seen that certain plants, as they react in the northern hemisphere to how they react and are grown in the southern hemisphere, react drastically differently. And so we need to make sure that we understand that, because it's how it's grown, make sure how the final product also looks. When we're looking at the seedlings as well, the processing on how it's actually being done to make sure that you get that reproducibility, the plant cultivation. In Southern Africa, South Africa, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, Zambia, you get different types of grow methodology. And that's important to be able to understand it when we're looking, again, at our final products in the new process. Certain products are being processed in terms of drying, some are being ground up, and then, again, it comes down to the extraction. Extraction methodologies have changed. You're looking 15 months ago, it was definitively CO2. Now we're talking about, again, solvents. Then we're talking about a combination of all of those. I think the market in terms of the extraction will change and will constantly change, and the technology will constantly be getting better. If you look at what's recently happened in terms of the Tesla truck that's been launched, I think it doesn't necessarily need to be pretty, the processes, but we need to make sure that it works to get the final product out. Processing, and again, and that the methodologies and how you can do this and who can also do it, we're finding more and more people in the market and being able to hopefully specialize in that. When we're talking about, again, the market as to what that extraction will look like, some people are looking that they'll stop at the first pass separation, your full spectrum. Some people want the terpene profile, and some people still want your isolates. So I think there will be a market for everybody. At what stage it'll get to and how quickly, again, it comes down to that commercialization aspect that will drive this whole demand. Quality, however, is a given, and I think that we must make sure that we focus on. At the end of the day, when we're looking at something like this, we need to be able to understand the types of cannabis that we're planning to grow, and again, the types of cannabis and the focus areas that it'll be looking at. The best definition of quality that I've ever heard is it's got to be fit for purpose. So when we're talking about in the Canadian market recreational use and that versus in the South African market when we're talking about it defined only as a medicine currently, we need to make sure that we are focused on what aspects you're looking at. But I think it's also important to know that the people that are also growing this, who are extracting it and manufacturing it, need to be also doing the right type of testing. So the testing, and again, at what stage are you doing? Some testing's happening in terms of pesticide testing after extraction when you actually should have picked up at the growing stage that you had a contamination. So in terms of the test aspects, it's important to try and look at making sure that you do the right test at the right time as well. Again, test methodologies in terms of what type of equipment is available. This is becoming more and more commercially available and also a lot cheaper in terms of it. When you're looking at your compound testing, it's important not just to look at your CBD and THC tests, but your pesticides, residual solvents, heavy metals, mycotoxins, and micro. I was at a site up past Pretoria a couple of months ago where the guy was actually saying that, yes, his next-door neighbor uses pesticides, but that's okay. It's on his side of the fence, not on our side of the fence. You've got to look at what you're actually planning to use the product for. Again, when you're looking at your test markers, it's also important to make sure that you know what you want to get out when you're talking final product. Micro testing is also very important. It's also no use turning around and doing certain expensive micro-testing later on when you should have actually done it earlier in the process. Likewise, heavy metals, pesticide testing, and of course your solvent testing. It's important that when you get to the final product that you've actually got something that resembles a C of A that you can use. And you can take that C of A and you can put it, and that whether you're selling into the local market or overseas. So again, when we're talking about new product development, we're not only talking about the final product, we're sometimes also talking about that intermediate. And that intermediate from South Africa can be sold internationally, so it's important that you're doing the tests that not only are required here, but are also required in the country that you're going to be selling this to. Importance of testing at the end of the day, it's not this big black hole and that consumes all your profits. It's important to make sure that you're protecting the consumer safety. Again, it's also protecting your brand. If you have a failure and you can't account for it, you need to know why to get to the root cause so that you don't do it again. It's making sure that you've got consistency and potency. And that patient confidence is very, very important at the end of the day. When we're now looking at our NPD and our final product for cannabis, it's important to note that currently there are no registered products in South Africa with SAHPRA that have gone through this process. Every other product that is currently on the market should be considered based on the exemption that it is and that going to be called up. Now that exemption was meant to be for a year, from 23rd of May this year until 22nd next year. I do believe that engagement through SAHPRA, we believe that it will actually be finalized before that. So you need to make sure that your products are ready and compliant. We are still pushing because at 20 milligrams per daily dose, it's extremely low. There's a lot of scientific information out there that says that you can actually use it at a much higher dose and that for a lot longer and still being safe. But I think that at the end of the day, that SAHPRA, as well as many of the other regulatory bodies, are taking the approach to start low and go slow. The industry, however, wants them to go a lot faster. And I think that at the end of the day, we need to be engaging with those authorities to make sure that we can give them the right information to show how safe the products are and exactly what is important. When you're looking at your product development, it's important to try and partner with somebody that's got that research capabilities, that understands this, that's either got a botanical extraction knowledge, got a manufacturing knowledge, and also knows the quality aspect. What we're seeing in South Africa is that that ideal partner generally is your CAM's complementary manufacturer, purely because they realize that the quality has got to be high, but your turnaround has got to be a lot quicker. And I think that that process makes a big, big difference to your final product. So again, coming back and looking at now a slightly different approach, generally when you look at it from a farmer point of view, you start from your active and you get to your commercialization. When we're talking botanicals, we look at it the other way around. We look at what is the final product that we want, and then we backtrack it into what do we want to grow now, and how do we want to get it through that entire process. It's also important to look at the current offerings. The current offerings generally were your liquid dosage forms, your capsules, tablets, effervescents, powders, maybe topical sprays. New things, however, that are really, really exciting is things like powder and liposomal technology, transdermal patches, oral films, bioengineering as well. And again, that all relating back to your CBD products, which will eventually go into other products. It's important to make sure that you're partnering with somebody that has a decent manufacturing facility, because at the end of the day, it's the old adage, rubbish in, rubbish out. That if your quality going in can't be sorted out at the time, or alternatively another source and they're brought in, no matter how good your manufacturer is, they're not going to be able to improve that. But it's also important that at the manufacturing site, you're not going to have other contaminants that are brought in and also other problems that arise. So it's important to look at making sure temperature and humidity control, and that water treatment plants as well. I spent a lot of time up in Nigeria, and a lot of the focus in terms of what you can actually do, and that you spend a lot of money to get the right APIs in, and then if you use a bad water supply, and that you're really just going to contaminate that product as well. When you're looking at your bulk manufacturing as well, it's important to make sure that the stainless steel containers that they're using and the hold tanks, that they then have enough time to be able to do the right type of testing for your products. It's also important that the filling and packing and the dosage forms comes out the way you want it. The testing, we're seeing that the general testing is very important. Your HPLC testing, your instrument lab testing is important, but there's also a focus locally to go to your high-performance thin layer chromatography, your HPTLC testing as well, micro testing, and also stability. Stability, a lot of people are saying, well, do I need to do stability in terms of the fact that the exemption says that it's a health supplement? I always recommend it, purely on the basis you want to know what your product's going to do in 6 months' time, 12 months' time. And it's important to look at that because that comes down to your brand credibility. And I think that at the end of the day, that will show you to you. When we're looking at what's in the market, you're looking at certain types of oral liquid dosage forms, you're looking at gels, you're looking at things like your CBD in soft gels. What we're seeing is that there's more and more of an interest in your liquid hard gelatin capsules that are coming out now as well, so that you can also brand it differently. And again, cosmetics. At this point, cosmetics, when you speak to SAHPRA, they're saying the product shouldn't be into cosmetics. You can, however, use it in topical. I think that these discussions, once the exemption is finalized, will make a big difference going forward. But I think at the end of the day, we need to know what do we want to sell to the end consumer and how quickly can we adapt to that. I think at the end of the day, it's also very important to realize that we all have one of those friends. Looking around the room, I'm hoping that we're going to have more and more of these type of friends. But it's important to not necessarily, just because we're going to be in the same stream as Big Pharma, we don't necessarily have to carry all the necessary problems that pharma does. We need to try and learn from that, to adapt quickly and to make sure that we get the right type of products for the end consumer. Again, best definition of quality, fit for purpose. Thank you very much. That is me.